Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to have you all here today for our Glow Education series. My mute button kept happening. Sorry, I'm going to start over. Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to have you all here today for our Glow Education series. Before we get started, I would like to introduce myself and share about upcoming opportunities for families to engage with Groves. Then I'm excited to introduce our presenter, and we'll review a few housekeeping items as well. My name is Linda Roslansky, and I'm the Director of Outreach here at Glow. I have the great pleasure of working alongside our Learning Center and admissions teams. We have a robust calendar of events to engage with Glow and explore our Academy and Learning Center this year. We have many upcoming Groves Academy admissions events this fall, and we would love to see you there. We have our first open house of the year next week on November 6th, where you can see our newly renovated Academy and visit some of the classrooms. There will also be an opportunity to hear from our school leadership, teachers, and current families. To register and see all of these upcoming events, please visit our website. So a few housekeeping events before we get started. To help us stay on schedule, your camera and microphone have been turned off. Our speaker will present, and then we will take some questions at the end. Please use the chat function or bubble at the top of your screen to submit your questions, and I will moderate those to help stay on track. And this webinar will be recorded and shared with everybody who registered. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce our presenter. Judy Richarson-Mahre, founder of Kaleidoscope Coaching and Counseling, is a compassionate and action-oriented therapist and family and educator. She is an outstanding ADHD expert, coach, and parent coach, and all-around wonderful human being. I added that last part. Her specialties include parenting, couples counseling, premarital counseling, and working with individuals, families, and couples impacted by ADHD. She also works with individuals who are struggling with anxiety, depression, grief and loss, goal setting, and self-esteem. Take it away, Judy. I feel like I should have some drum roll, but I'm going to turn it over to you and we'll start your slideshow.
Sounds good. Thank you. I appreciate it. I will talk a little bit more about my history and my background as we go through, but thank you, Linda. That was very, very nice and generous. I appreciate the opportunity. So today we're talking about ADHD and how it really impacts the whole family. And so the objectives that we have, or the objectives that I have in this webinar, are really, we're going to understand at a high level what ADHD is, and then we're going to talk in detail about how it impacts behavior, family relationships, and family dynamics. And then we're going to walk through several interventions and things. So what do you do about it, right? So let's talk first about what is ADHD. I am very passionate about having individuals and families that are impacted by ADHD learn about ADHD and learn about how the brain is working and how it's impacted by ADHD and how it thinks differently. Because I think many people that have ADHD live with an overwhelming amount of negative messages, and that often develops into shame. So learn about the brain, move out of shame. Kathy Flaminio has that quote, and I wholeheartedly agree. So let's talk a bit at a high level about what ADHD is. So ADHD is a brain connectivity issue. So the brain connectivity networks that carry information from one end of your brain to the other don't work well for people with ADHD. And it's particularly in those areas or regions of the brain that are responsible for self-regulation or self-control. It's neurobiological, meaning this is a neurological issue. It is not a behavior issue. And so you don't outgrow it, but because it is a developmental delay, the brain develops over time, and these brain regions continue to develop until the brain is fully developed around age 27, give or take. In addition, we have neuroplasticity on our side. So there are many things that we can do to help the brain learn new tasks and habits and those types of things, and lay down new neural pathways to do different activities. ADHD is also highly hereditary. You've probably heard that. It's second only to height. So if a child has ADHD, almost always one of the parents has ADHD, or you can find a very close relative. In a small area of the population, a brain injury can cause ADHD, but otherwise it's highly hereditary. So when we talk about those brain regions that are impacted by ADHD, we're talking about what we call the executive functions. And so these are all of the executive functions. I may be slicing and dicing them a little bit differently than other people you've heard, but these are the areas of the brain that are often impacted. And so you can see that these develop over time. If you look at this, the number here beside this is when these different executive functions begin to develop in a neurotypical brain. And it's delayed for a neurodivergent brain up to a third of their chronological age. So imagine if you're 6, your executive functions may be delayed up to 2 years. If you're 12, your executive functions may be delayed up to 4 years, right? So middle school child with executive functions of 8-year-old. Or when we're sending kids off to get their licenses or off to college, those delays might be impacting them up to 4 or 5 or 6 years. And so we have to consider that and how that is impacting each of the individuals that are impacted. So I'm not going to go through these, but there are a couple that I will highlight. In inhibiting, the inhibitory system is the part of the brain that's responsible for helping you stop and think. And it also is the part of the brain that manages your attention. So we often hear attention deficit is not really an accurate term. It's not an issue with paying attention. It's an issue with managing attention. Often people don't realize that emotional self-regulation is part of the equation, and it very definitely is. Many individuals that have ADHD struggle with emotional self-regulation, and they suffer with things like rejection sensitivity because they've gotten, a lifetime of overwhelmingly negative messages. And then you have time management, which is often a kind of a hallmark symptom, along with planning and organizing or prioritizing. Internal motivation is another one that we're going to talk a little bit more about in a few minutes, because that is not as well understood, and that impacts individuals with ADHD greatly. And so I want to talk through that a little bit, because that impacts families and how individuals are relating with the people that they're interacting with. So I've often heard that ADHD is like having 20 TVs going on in your head at one time. And so I want to play this simulation because it is really eye-opening. This is an example of 2 TVs going on at one time. And so I want to play this. I hope you can hear that.
And anything today, because I've just been waiting for this appointment. And of course, now that it's time to go, I'm not ready. Okay. Am I ever going to hang up that piece of artwork on the floor? I mean, maybe next weekend.
That is
I should eat those vegetables I bought before they go bad again.
Why did I walk in here?
I'll remember in a minute.
Oh, shoot.
Did Einstein When was the last time I actually closed the rings in my Apple Watch? Is this an hour towards my stand goal? Great.
Yeah,
I did forget to drink my tea, though. Do I still have that big box of goldfish in my closet?
Metaphorically, of
I
course.
need to remember to do my stretches for physical therapy
wallet,
later.
right.
Who am I kidding? No one does those. I got that book
Wallet,
several weeks ago, and I haven't even
keys,
opened
those
it
are
yet.
also
That's
important.
embarrassing.
Am I forgetting anything else?
You forgot a smile, is what someone
magnets.
would say if they saw
Yep,
my RBF
okay.
in public.
Let's see.
Brief moment
I
of
need
clarity.
anything
Oh,
else.
never mind.
Jacket. It's convenient. I left it right here. Wow.
I really need to clean up my
And
car.
time to
There
go.
are way too many receipts in
Only
there.
5
I hope
minutes
this
late for
appointment
this
goes
appointment.
quickly. I
I've
really
been
want to play
for
some
all
vodka.
day.
So when I show that to individuals that have ADHD, they're kind of overcome, right? Because it really describes how their brain is going all the time. There's many things that are happening, and it's really hard for them to, discern or decide. And their brain isn't helping, right? Their brain isn't helping them determine, I need to block out these 19 TVs and focus on this one TV. So I think that's a good reminder of how the ADHD brain works. So let's talk about internal motivation. So in the center of your brain, if you're looking at the sphere of your brain, and in the very center is the part of the brain that is responsible for the internal motivation, or the just do it circuit, right? And you can see on this brain scan in this green box, that is the area of the brain responsible for internal motivation. And so you can see color shows activity. And so in this brain that doesn't have ADHD on the left, that brain is working hard. Both brains are doing something very, 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 very boring, right? And so their just do it circuit, or their internal motivation, is having to work overtime to help them muscle through whatever the boring or uninteresting task is. And so you can see that inside of this green box in the brain that does not have ADHD, that there is activity here. This internal motivation center is helping this brain do the boring task. In the brain that has ADHD, the green box, there's no activity in there. So often brains that have ADHD don't have this internal motivation center. It's not working effectively or efficiently, or it's not working at all. And so our brains are very miraculous, and they compensate for the lack of that function. And so they are looking at these two areas of the brain. And the question is, what are those areas of the brain? What are they compensating? So when you're, I often ask questions when I'm in person with people, and I say, to determine what are those areas that are compensating in the brain, I ask questions to parents that have kids that have ADHD, and I ask, what happens if you ask them to do like a chore or something that they really dislike, or they don't prefer? And oftentimes I get two answers. The first is they avoid, or they try and get out of it in some way, or they get distracted and they disappear. The second answer is, if they get distracted or avoid and that doesn't work, and you keep pushing, and they are pushed to do this non-preferred activity, or a disliked chore, then they get angry. So what that tells us is, these areas of the brain are the emotion centers. So it's important to get their emotions involved, to get them motivated to do a thing, right? So we often talk about motivation, and if it's important, then you would do it. We often incent or give positive consequences for things that we want more of, and then we have punishments or negative consequences for things we want less of. Well, the problem is that assumes that a child has the ability to do those things, but because the ADHD brain does not have that working internal motivation center, then it is very stimulated neurologically in the ADHD brain. And so we need a different approach, right? So we're going to talk about how do you get their emotion centers involved, and how do you focus on things that are preferred. So I want to go a little bit further with this internal motivation, because all of our brains are wired to determine our preferences, what we like, what we're passionate about, what we dislike. If we are morning people, if we're night people, night owls, if we are like broccoli or Brussels sprouts, or we dislike them. Cilantro is often a very controversial thing, but that's because our brain wiring determines, do we like cilantro, the taste of cilantro, or does it taste like soap? You often hear people are either, yes, I love cilantro, or no. And so those are determined by how your brain is wired. And it goes a little bit farther. So in individuals that have ADHD, their brains are interest-based driven. So their internal motivation is determined by their interests, not importance. And in our society, we are living in an importance-based society. And we often hear people that have ADHD often hear, well, if it was important, you would do it. That's not true. Their brain is not motivated by importance. It is motivated by interest. And so that is a relatively new concept that is becoming more understood. And people that have ADHD are absolutely, affirming that their brain, they have a heck of a time getting their brain motivated to do things that are important. I used to say to my family that they didn't have a sense of urgency. So a little bit of history. I started out my career as in a very different field. I was a mechanical engineer, and I married my husband 32 years ago. When we had our first child, she was diagnosed with ADHD, and my husband was too. And then I had two more biological children. They both have ADHD. And then we inherited a young man that was estranged from his family, and he has ADHD too. So we have everyone in my household has ADHD other than me. And so I have spent a lot of time trying to understand. And this is very, very accurate, that interest is what is driving interest is driving the motivation, not importance. So we move our bodies for two reasons. One is for reward, and one is fear. If something is not interesting to an ADHD brain, and they have an interest-driven nervous system, then they need things to be more fun, interesting, novel, competitive sometimes. If it's a unique passion, they will be able to focus on that. But there's other ways to reward and engage their emotion centers to do unpreferred tasks. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So this is a really important piece. ADHD comes with its superpowers as well, right? So we can't ignore, we understand that there are several difficulties, but there are superpowers as well. And so whenever I'm problem solving, I'm asking my family, because they think very creatively. They always have different ideas of how to solve a problem. There's increased curiosity. They have strong intuition. If they're passionate about something, they have endless energy and ability to take risks. So I come from a philosophy that you have to understand their strengths, because you have to start with strengths. You can't start with struggles or weaknesses. And so we start with their superpowers and go from there. I do want to mention that ADHD in girls is often missed, right? Because girls are often masking that they're having struggles. They're really working hard to meet the social norms, meet expectations. Their symptoms are often internalized. You don't see the outward behavior that you do in boys often when you're dealing with girls. And so these are the things that you see in girls that are masking type behaviors. And so they slip under the radar and they suffer in silence oftentimes. Okay, so let's talk about if ADHD is untreated, there's many adverse effects or life outcomes. And at ADHD, if you've listened to Russell Barkley ever speak, he talks about ADHD adversely affects every aspect of quality of life and longevity. And these deficits in self-regulation, they lead to poor self-care, impulsive and high-risk behavior, etc. So they impact all areas of life negatively. That's if it's not treated. And so I apologize for my dog barking at the garbage people. But it impacts, there's a myth that if people are on medication for ADHD, that they are more likely to develop a substance use issue. The reverse is actually true based on the studies and the science. But it impacts personal hygiene, driving performance, relationships, and we're going to talk more about relationships, job performance, diet and exercise, etc. Accidental injury is often an issue, mental health issues, self-harm, and something that when we talk about emotional self-regulation, oftentimes people that have ADHD are developing what we call rejection sensitivity, which is all of the negative messages start to make a person very sensitive to anything that tastes or smells or feels in the least bit about of disapproval or disappointment or not meeting expectations. So there are some significant mental health issues if we don't normalize. Now, when I talk about normalizing how and understanding how the brain works, I think it is really important that we're talking to the individual that has ADHD too, and making sure that they understand how their brain works, not just the people around them or caregivers. So I'm very open with clients about, let's understand how your brain works. Let's understand where you struggle, and let's understand all the strengths and the superpowers as well. So let's move on. ADHD really impacts the whole family, and I'm a very systems thinker. And if you think of a child's mobile, if you pull one of those figures, every single one of them responds and changes and adjusts or compensates in some way until the system gets back into balance. And that is very true for families that are being impacted by ADHD. Oops, went too far. Okay. Can I get back? Okay. So these are the areas that we're going to talk about more, but really ADHD impacts the family in many ways, right? There's lots of parental stress trying to understand the issue, understand how to help children, how to deal with children who might be out of control, etc. It causes, oftentimes, one of the parents is dealing with ADHD as well, and that causes problems and conflicts in their relationship. And there's a decreased confidence and consistency in their parenting. The cost of raising a child with ADHD has been said that it could be up to 5 times greater compared to youth or individuals, kids that do not have ADHD. There's more demand on parents, and often the child that has ADHD gets an unbelievable amount of additional attention that the kids that don't have ADHD don't get, and so they often feel left out. Children with ADHD, there's sleep issues, there's difficulty managing emotions, there's often school issues and behavior issues in and at home and at school. There's increased conflicts in the family, and then there's these daily activities that are more difficult for the ADHD brain, and so those individuals really struggle. How do they manage work and school? And so all of those areas impact the family that has ADHD as part of the equation. But there's hope, right? There's a lot of hope. So we'll get past this part, and then we'll start talking about what do we do about that. So I do want to just touch on impact to relationships. So when ADHD is part of a couple relationship, a marriage, or a partnership, research suggests that 60% of those couples are maladjusted or just struggling with managing their relationship. And divorce rates for those with ADHD are almost double those without ADHD. And so part of this is because there's a lot of misinformation about ADHD, and the individual with ADHD as well as the individual without don't understand what's going on, and so they make assumptions about about the intent or the reasons behind this the struggles that they're having in the relationship. And then when you add kids, the individuals that have ADHD often have a difficult time remembering agreements and remembering what are we going to do with the kids, or how are we going to respond in certain situations? What are the rules? What are the consequences, and how do we manage the structure? So there are struggles on both sides of the equation. The spouse with ADHD feels as though they are not understood, they are not accepted by the spouse without ADHD. There often is a discrepancy where the spouse that does not have ADHD assumes more of a parent type of role, where the spouse with ADHD assumes more of a child role, and that can be very, very damaging to the relationships. There's often communication issues where there's misunderstandings. And like I said, the individual that has ADHD may appear forgetful because they are not understanding or remembering the agreements, or they don't follow up on the agreements, or they don't follow through with disciplines and those types of things. So there's all sorts of factors that are playing in just that relationship between the parents. And then we add kids and the kids to the mix, and that is a difficult thing. So what do we do about it? It sounds pretty scary, right? So I like to make the analogy that if I ask you, if you have glasses and I ask you to take off your glasses, many people cannot see either long distance or short term right in front of them without their glasses. And when we say, if you take off your glasses and you can't read, we don't say to children, well, work harder, or you're not applying yourself, or if it was important, you would do it, right? Those are things we don't hear when we're struggling with a child that has poor eyesight. We just give them the tools and give them the glasses, and then they have tools that will help them, and they move on. My hope is that someday we're there with ADHD. It's like, oh, your brain works this way? Great, here's some tools. So we're going to move into tools now, right? And these interventions are great for all family members. They're necessary for many of the kiddos and the family members that have ADHD, but they're fine to implement, and I think it's easier to implement for the whole family, because then everybody is understanding the structure and what is expected and all of that. So I'm going to talk about psychological interventions, because I think that the psychological piece and the mental health piece of this is so important. So I'm going to first talk about fixed versus growth mindset. So I'll sum up fixed versus growth mindset, because I think that there's some misunderstandings, and not everybody understands fixed versus growth mindset. Fixed mindset means there's a belief inside of you that your intelligence or your abilities are fixed, and there's nothing you can do about those things. And if so there's behavior that becomes very protective of your intelligence or your ability to play a sport or anything like that. And you get very protective of that. So you avoid challenges. If there's obstacles, you kind of shut down and give up. You don't see effort as the way to get better and move forward. You shrink from criticism, and you're threatened or feel that the success of others is not valid, or is in some way not helpful. In a growth mindset, the fundamental thing in a growth mindset is we all have struggles. And the point of that is, what are you learning from your struggles? Are you able to figure out or problem solve what is happening, or what could you do different that would help you next time that you run into a similar situation, or that type of thing. So any struggles, any failure, we want to normalize that and say, wow, you really put yourself out there, you took a risk, how did it work? And what would you do differently next time to make it go better? Have you seen other people do things that would help you? What would you do more of? What would you do less of? And asking those questions, normalizes the failures or the struggles, and it also gives kids some more skills to deal with struggles and failure. And it builds persistence and grit, right? So we want to minimize simple praise, right? I think we've seen the effects of simple praise on different people and kids as they grow up. And we want to give recognition instead, where we're saying, I see you're doing XYZ. You worked hard on that. I like this aspect. I would change this aspect. You encourage feedback, and you encourage what kind of things, again, worked. How were you successful? How did you do that? What would you do differently? And then recognize the normal failure. The biggest learnings in my life have been from, failure or catastrophic failure, and they've really informed how I go forward. So I think this is creating a growth mindset culture is very important. I also want to reframe anxiety, because I see many kids that have anxiety, and I want to first say, I don't want to minimize anxiety or an anxiety disorder, because it's very real, it's very debilitating, very hard for many people. However, I think that we have gotten to the point where anxiety has become kind of a dirty word, and we need to normalize that anxiety is really important. It has kept us alive. It drives our instincts and our intuition, and it's really the wisdom of your nervous system that is telling you valuable information, that there's something over here that's bothering you or unsettling for some reason. So pay attention to that. and then figure out where do you focus your energy and how do you build on what is causing anxiety. I think that if we help children understand that anxiety is their wisdom, their internal wisdom, and then how do you come up with a plan? How do you deal with that? That normalizes it and helps build resilience and grit. And we'd have to talk another time about when do you know that it's a real disorder and not just that natural anxiety that is produced by many things. Okay, so I think that if you emotions escalate and you're feeling threatened in some way, as a caregiver, I always validate those emotions. I help the individual calm down and calm their body down, and then we problem solve. We know that as anxiety goes up, the access to executive functions goes down. And so we need to calm the nervous system down so that we're able to problem solve and get our thinking brain back online. So then once you have the problem, and a plan for how are you going to deal with that issue, then we implement the plan and it starts over. This really helps to build some empowerment as well. I think anxiety is one of those emotions that often feels like it's happening to you and you're powerless to deal with it. And I want to give kids the tools to deal with their anxiety and build from that. That has been in my kids. That has been a genetic. They are all genetically predisposed to incredible, debilitating anxiety from my husband's family, and so we have really done this with our kids, and I think they continue to deal with anxiety, but they have better coping skills. So, okay. So I'm sure many people have seen this. This is called the handy model of the brain. This is your reptilian brain down at the base of your skull. This is where all of your emotion centers are, and it is driving fight, flight, freeze, right? If there is anything that happens where that you feel threatened, then this part of your brain, the frontal lobe, goes offline. And so there's no thinking that's happening. There's just this emotion center that's driving everything. So you need to calm your body down and get that thinking brain back online. So oftentimes we see when people are fighting or there's some conflict at home, we're fighting and we're all offline, right? Our thinking brains are all offline and we're only operating out of emotions. I encourage families to take a break, calm down, and sometimes you need to help your kids figure out how to calm down and then come back when your thinking brains are back online, and then you can problem solve together. I do that with couples. I do that with families. And it really helps. It has certainly helped my family and my relationship with my husband. So there's many ways to calm down. And I kind of see them in these four categories, right? So there's relaxation techniques where you can breathe or do some grounding techniques. There's many things that help relax your body and calm down. But that's often very difficult for people. Meditation or those types of things really are difficult for many people. So we often pair breathing and relaxation techniques to movement techniques, which is, I partner with Kathy Flaminio often from Move Mindfully, and she has lots of movements that are relaxation and movement techniques together that are very, very effective. So movement. Movement could be move mindfully, it could be jumping, running, walking, any exercise, could be pacing, it could be just moving from one room to another and or changing positions, right? So movement is any movement. We often say that motion changes emotions, right? And so that's a movement is a really powerful technique as well. Then there's sensory techniques. Sensory techniques are if you hug someone that is a safe person to you, if you hug them for a full minute or more, there is a point when you get close to a minute or around a minute where your body will finally feel relaxed and safe, and it will let down, right? Like that. So sensory techniques could be that hug for a full minute. It could be a weighted blanket. It could be something sensory that you can rub and those types of things. Could be brushing. It could be a weighted blanket. Could be fidgets. It could be a petting an animal, any of those things. And then we have the distraction. So distraction techniques are often take your brain away from whatever it's struggling with long enough for your body and your nervous system to calm down. So doing puzzles, coloring, crafting, Legos, talking with a friend, laughing, reading a book or a magazine, crafting, any of those things. And it really, what I encourage clients to do is take a blank one of these and start brainstorming and trying some of these things. So yeah. So I see the question in the chat around how siblings can develop coping skills too. All of these techniques work with siblings and the kiddos that have ADHD. So I'm implementing all of these interventions with all of the kids, not just the kids and my husband and I, right? I'm working with the whole family to develop these skills and find out what works. So each of them could have one of these sheets to say, what are the things that are helpful to you and what would you pick, right? What would you pick to do to help calm your body down? But as we go, all of these techniques are good for siblings and for individuals. So let's talk about family and parenting. So like I said earlier, I think it is crucially important that everyone understands ADHD and what are the mechanisms of ADHD. And so parental knowledge of ADHD increases their implementation of strategies. It increases everyone's compassion and understanding and curiosity. It helps adolescents overcome myths and misconceptions. And when the kids are taught about ADHD, they show increased knowledge of treatments and characteristics. They understand their brain more completely. And it doesn't necessarily change the development, the course of their brain development, but it gives them more confidence that there's not something wrong with them. That's not a character flaw or something wrong with them individually. It's how their brain is wired, and we all have strengths and struggles, and this just happens to be their struggles. So I find kids much more able to say, oh, well, that's how my brain works, and this is what helps me, or this is what I need in school. It really helps to build that self-efficacy and self-knowledge and move into growth mindset. If you feel like it's something wrong with you, then people are more likely to shut down or move into shame instead of saying, no, this is my brain wiring. I'm a good person. I have all sorts of strengths. And these couple things are struggles. So I'm gonna deal with that. Okay. So like I said, this is highly hereditary. So oftentimes parents have ADHD challenges, and that impacts their ability to implement consistency in routines and structure, or follow through on rules, consequences, those types of things. And so there's many times when parents bring individuals or children or adolescents to see me And we start with the parents and then we help them build the structure and the scaffolding, so to speak, and the behavior strategies that they may need. And then we that helps put something in place for the kids as well. So these are the areas we're going to talk through when you're looking at parenting children with ADHD. So developing that culture of resilience with growth mindset, we've already talked about. I'm going to talk about a parenting philosophy called positive discipline, and what those tenets of positive discipline are. I'm going to talk about behavior techniques and how to modify how we implement behavior techniques, because the traditional behavior techniques of rewards and consequences, positive and negative consequences, don't work for the ADHD brain. And so you need to develop more of a learning culture. We have to talk about a disability perspective and how that plays out in the homes. We have to, we'll talk about structure and routine and habits, and then encouragement and some other areas. And of course, self-care and a support network for the parents, because this is often a very difficult journey. So let's talk about positive discipline. So I come from an Adlerian background. Alfred Adler was a psychologist that believed in a lot of mutual respect, kindness and firmness, balanced, and making sure that there's self-advocacy and children have a voice, and that mutual respect between parent and child, and basically mutual respect for everyone. But it's tricky when you're trying to be kind and firm. I think we as a society have moved from more of an authoritarian, or were raised in more of an authoritarian type of model, and we're moving a little bit more into a permissive model. And I'm really advocating that we come to the center, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the positive discipline tenets are based on helping children feel a sense of connection. Adler believed that all behavior is driven by the need for significance and belonging. And so we want to be able to connect. We talk often about connecting with children before correcting children. And that connection is really important to build on mutual respect, giving them voice, etc. We talked about mutually respectful and encouraging is effective long-term. Often when we're talking about something, a situation, we're looking at how can we fix the situation or address the situation now in the short term. And I really want people to be looking at the short term and the long-term effects. So if I'm punishing or very punitive, that might stop the behavior in the short term, but in the long term, it's not teaching any social skills or life skills, right? And there's an importance in teaching those. It also invites children to discover how capable they are. And if you want more information, I am offering another round of classes early next year. So there's more information there. But what I was talking about is most of us grew up in parenting with parents where the parenting style was very authoritarian, right? Parents had all the power. They were the lions. Kids were the lambs. We were often not given a voice or able to say this is what we want and this is what we think. It's a very rare family where there was some of that ability to speak up and advocate for yourself. And authoritarian model really has parents having all the power, kids having none, and kids really focusing on relationship and understanding that the relationship is more important. And so we grew up in a very selfless type of environment, right? Don't ask for what you want. Make sure that other people are happy first. I think as a culture, we've moved much, much more over to a permissive or gentle parenting approach. And I think people have misunderstood gentle parenting for no boundaries. And so it has leaned more towards permissive, which is really the children have all the power, parents have none. Children are the lions, parents are the lambs. And there is really a reduced focus on the relationships. And so kids become much more entitled and much more looking for their needs to be met without thinking of the needs of others. So really, positive discipline pulls us back to the middle. It sets that mutual respect up so that both parents and kids have power, and that their needs are everyone's needs are met, and you're considering each other, and that the relationship is important, and they are able to advocate for themselves. So let's talk about behavioral techniques and strategies. Traditional CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy strategies focus on positive and negative consequences. And that assumes that children have control over their behavior, which is not true for much of the behavior that you're seeing with children that have ADHD. It is not behavioral. There are many situations where kids have nothing left in their room, or they have no toys and they have no privileges. And because they have lost it all, and it doesn't matter, it's not changing or helping them manage their behavior. You really have to address the behavioral issues, understanding the ADHD brain, and modifying how you do your parenting, how you encourage that growth with them. So, for instance, ADHD brains are often very impulsive. So when you say, "Did you break that lamp?" and they respond and say, "No, I didn't do that," then you say, "Okay, remember your brain often speaks and doesn't tell the truth the first time around. So I want you to think back and give your brain a minute to catch up, and then we'll ask again, right?" And then if they lie the second time after giving their brain some time to catch up, then that is more of a issue with bad behavior, poor decisions. Oftentimes kids need a break, right? Where they take a break, calm down, and then come back and problem solve, because their brains can't think in the moment. This is true in couples relationships as well. Oftentimes, one of the individual with ADHD needs more time to process through what they're thinking. They can't think in the moment, or they get overwhelmed by emotion, and they need that time to calm their nervous system, give their brain some time to think through things. So when we're talking about behavioral techniques, it really is, what is the behavior we want, and how are we going to systematically teach a child that behavior, right? So impulsive behavior, stop and think, is a very difficult thing. How do you set that up so they're starting to build in stop, think, problem solve? I often get a lot of flack for this this slide, but I think that it's important that we understand the disability and the struggles that are related to ADHD. You wouldn't ask a physically disabled person to do things they can't. And yet every day we ask our kids that have ADHD to do things that they are physically and neurologically unable to do. And so you have to discern, and it's sometimes very difficult. You have to discern, what is the behavior. Is it due to the ADHD brain and self-control and self-regulation, or is it due to something else like misbehavior or poor decision making, right? I often say that ADHD is an explanation and it guides some direction, but it does not excuse bad behavior, because our job as parents is to raise these kids to be productive adults, and they have to understand their limitations. And they won't, if you get stopped by a police officer because you ran a red light, they don't care if you have ADHD or not, right? You still have to meet the expectations of the society and the family and the groups, that the communities that you're involved in. So I really think that it's important that we understand this. Now, having said that, I also think this is one of the easiest or the most treatable struggle that there is. So when we talk about how do you treat ADHD, one of the best ways is to build habits. And when we talk, habits really take the load off of the executive function, right? It's an automatic thing your brain does. And so you really want to take the load off the executive functions, because those are unreliable. So to develop a habit, you have to have external structure in place that is consistently and constantly reinforcing the behavior you want, like brushing your teeth, right? Morning routines, nighttime routines, after school routines, how you calendar, how you keep track of your grades and missing assignments, how you any of those types of organizational things, you can build those into habits. Now, there are many things that you can't build into a habit. So you either have to pair them with a habit, or you have to build an external structure that encourages you and helps your brain remember to remember when you need to do something, right? So there's many techniques and tools to do that. And so from a family perspective, building that internal structure or external structure is really helping individuals and kids understand these are the rules. They have to be written down and posted. They have to be agreed upon with the family and understood. And they have to be referred to often. And then you're doing behavior techniques. If this is a rule that oftentimes one of the first rules that I recommend is respect. And so if a child is disrespectful, you say, not okay, that's against the rules, and you need to back up and try again, or you need to take a break and come back when you can calmly talk and be respectful. And sometimes this is a process of learning how to manage their impulses, but setting up that structure and reinforcing the rules and the goals, and then building in accountability, right? How do you make it right? What are the consequences if they're not able to continue to do that? Do they lose privileges, or do they earn privileges when they're doing the right things? And most importantly is, are you as a parent managing your own emotions around all of this, right? Because the more emotional we get, the more cha-ching or reward they get for bad behavior. So we're really focusing on positive reinforcement, and way more energy for positive reinforcement, and negative reinforcement with little to no energy and disengaging. Okay. The other piece of this is, once you put a structure in place, then you need to consider maintenance of that structure. Individuals, adults with ADHD, love structure and routine. So do kids. But they have a very difficult time implementing or maintaining a structure or a routine. And so when you're talking about routines, the question is, how are you going to reinforce that routine and make sure that it's out, it's posted, or it's put up somewhere, or there's alarms, or there's something that is helping that individual maintain the routine. I don't know what happened. Okay. Executive functions impact time management, emotional self-regulation, and I'm going to make a note on screens, right, as part of this. So when we're talking about ADHD, often the ADHD brain does not experience the passage of time. So they view time as now or not now. And if it's not now, it's gone, right? Unless there is some reminder that tells them you have to think about this now. So that's why many people have a hard time following through on things that are not immediately important, right? And they don't understand that oftentimes I hear we're leaving for a wedding and we need to leave at 10 o'clock, and at 10 to 10 my partner is jumping in the shower, or my kids are saying we need a gift, right? Or we're leaving for the birthday party and we didn't bring something, or it's bring a treat day and they tell you 4 minutes up before you need to leave the house. So there's lots of things from a time management perspective that are impacted, and you really need to understand this so that you're setting up routines, you're setting expectations of time, and you're helping them learn how do you estimate time, how do you plan, how do you do that, setting up calendaring and other areas that are useful in time management. So we always talk about externalizing time and visualizing time. When I'm talking about counting backwards, if I need to leave for school or be on the bus at 8, then right before I have to, it's going to take me 10, 15 minutes to get my backpack ready. And then right before that is I have to eat breakfast, and that's going to take 10 minutes. And then right before that is I'm finishing, personal hygiene, getting dressed, all those things. That's counting backwards and estimating how long those types of things will take so that I know I have to be out of bed at this time, right? So habits like getting out of bed, following a morning routine, etc., are very, very difficult for many, many kids. And so that takes a long time to train and to teach those skills. So you need to, set your expectations accordingly. I'm often talking about the time and a half rule. So if they estimate something's going to take them half hour, I add another half or full time, right? So either a time and a half or 2 times, whatever they estimate. And then they need to learn how their estimating is working and what kind of a factor they need to put in for that as well. We've talked about the direct impact of anxiety and access to executive functions. And this is really, really very important because ADHD is not an inability or not a matter of not knowing what to do. It's a matter of performing in the moment. Does their neurology support doing what they know they need to do in the moment? So I'm going to make a comment on screens. This could be a whole nother webinar. I think that screens and limiting screens, oftentimes kids that have ADHD are very prone or susceptible to screen addiction. And so you need to have clear rules and expectations around screen time. They have to earn screen time. They have to have, oftentimes I'm recommending that you have responsibilities first and then you earn screen time from doing your responsibilities. Experts say that you should have as much time outside and doing other play activities as you do on a screen, which is, so if you're an hour on a screen, then you need to be playing for an hour outside or doing some non-screen activity. And I am a big advocate of no screens in the bedroom and charging phones and iPads and all electronics outside of the bedroom, where you as parents have control over that. There's several other interventions. There's lots of things that we can do. Technology is wonderful and really helps for many, many kids. Alarms or listening to books if they're struggling with reading, tools for talk to text, etc. Point of performance reminders are if I want you to do a certain thing at a certain time or in a certain place, then I need to put a point of performance reminder at the place that I want you to do that. So the example I always give is we have a mudroom that comes in from the garage, and I would always ask the kids to take off their shoes, right? And it never happened until I put a sign hanging from the ceiling with a note on it that said, take your shoes off. And as they walked in, it hit them in the face. And that was a good point of performance reminder. It worked until someone tore it down, and then that point of performance reminder was defunct. So any external reminders, we have lots of signs up in our home for our kids, for my husband, to just remind us these are the expectations, etc. When you're doing school things, color coding often helps kids differentiate between classes and different things like that, and constant and consistent reinforcement. So I'm going to open it up for questions in just a minute, but I want to give you a perspective. So I had two kids that had, I have 4 kids that have ADHD. 2 of them also had a medical issue. And when the oldest one was in about 4th or 5th grade, we had become all consumed with her medical issue and with her ADHD. And so I wanted to give her a different perspective and put the struggle she was having into perspective. So I came up with this puzzle exercise. So what this is I asked her to bring me a puzzle, and I said, pull out a piece. And if you're looking at that piece of the puzzle, can you tell me what the picture of the puzzle is? And she said, no. And I said, that's your medical issue. And then I grabbed another one and I said, can you tell me what that is? And she said, no. And I said, that's your ADHD. And then I went on and I took many pieces out and I said, this is your big fat heart. And this is the smile that lights up a room. And this is you as such a caring sister. This is the kid that advocates for the little guys at school. She was such an advocate for them. And so the point is, we need to keep ADHD and the struggles our kiddos are having into perspective. You cannot judge the entire puzzle by looking at one piece. So let's address that puzzle piece and help support them in their struggles. And then, gosh, let's exploit and highlight all of their strengths and superpowers. So ADHD, highly treatable. When you understand the ADHD brain, it's neurobiological. I think it's important that we're focusing on strengths, gifts, talents, and then supporting them in their struggles with a much more mutually respectful, kind, and firm parenting approach. Be flexible and forgiving with you and your children. Encourage a growth mindset as well as positive discipline and structure, and then coach and teach to build habits and skills. So let's open it up for questions.
Yeah, while we wait for people to share in the chat, and if you missed that earlier, there's a chat bubble at the top of your screen. You're welcome to type in any questions you might have there. And I think we just saw one popping up. That one is a complimentary. I think you already answered the one before that. I see a few other people typing too. Judy, that was such an amazing. Oh, go on.
I also want to address the first comment. When we were watching the simulation, ADHD simulation, someone put in the chat, this is incredibly accurate. It's like having computer files open and not knowing which one to close because they all seem valid and it causes paralysis. We talk a lot about that ability. Your brain neurology is not helping you determine what is, not priority, not important right now. And so it is very accurate. Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay. Since ADHD is neurological and not behavioral, does talk therapy help kids with ADHD? My experience is many kids, I don't see kids before middle school, but many kids, middle school and high school, they struggle. Talk therapy, they need tools, right? So if depression and anxiety is part of the equation, then yes, talk therapy helps for depression and anxiety and working through some of that. For ADHD, it's really tools, right? How do we implement tools? How do we build that structure for them? And all of those types of things. So I think that, there's many programs or therapists. That's where people often start. And really, unless anxiety and depression is part of the equation, which it often is, for ADHD specifically, it's all about understanding ADHD, understanding how your brain works, and then giving you tools.
Yeah, the questions keep popping in. That's fantastic. Judy, can you talk a little bit about medication and how that can help support a family member with ADHD? And if that might be a very big question to answer, but in a high level, if you can answer that one.
Yeah, I will answer that one. So I'm going to first say that medication is a very big decision. When I first got into this and started this journey with my children, I was very concerned about how they were diagnosed, how they were, and then putting them on a controlled substance. But study after study show, because this is neurobiological, medications do help and are often life-changing for people because it's addressing the neurological issue in the brain. The medication and the different classes of medication are really looking at that specific neurological issue and addressing that specifically. So I think that the medication does help a lot of people and is life altering. Now, it doesn't work for everyone, and there is some trial and error a bit. But if you see a difference, then the trial and error gets easier. The other piece of this is many people are worried about kids becoming zombies or losing their personality. And if the medication causes that kind of effect, then it's not the right medication, or it's too much, right? It's too high a dose. The other thing that I do want to say about medication is there's a difference between anxiety and depression medication and ADHD medication. Anxiety and depression medication has to go get into the system and build up over a time 4 to 6 weeks before you see full efficacy. And that takes some time to build up in the system, and then you adjust dosages, etc. That is not the case with ADHD meds. The ADHD meds go into the system. They are in the system within half hour to an hour. They are metabolized that day, and then they're out of the system. So you can find out very quickly if they're without risk, so to speak, if they're effective for the individuals in your family.
That's very helpful, Judy. Thank you. I see a couple questions in here surrounding social skills and supporting those kiddos with their social skills and when they struggle with friendships. Can you recommend any type of therapy or social groups or any other tips to help support that challenge that can be for those kids?
Yeah. Yeah. So again, I think it's important for them to know some of the reasons why that's difficult. When we understand the ADHD brain, we understand that it's hard for them to take information, read social cues, read facial expressions, those types of things. And so almost like when you're dealing with a child that has autism, working with a child to say, what do you think this person is feeling by facial expressions? Or walking through different scenarios that say, what do you what do you think is happening in this situation? What do you think that person is feeling? What do you feel? Or regrouping after and saying, how did that go from a growth mindset perspective? How did that go? How did that person respond? And I had to be very explicit with my kids, again, kindly, and say, well, that might have hurt their feelings if you said XYZ, and you might not have been able to read that, read that clue. So I think it really is those practicing those situations and modeling and doing role playing and those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Something you brought up even earlier in the presentation, that the level of the hereditary factor with ADHD, and within even your own family, you are the only one without ADHD, and how, so for those families and for those caregivers who might be the one who does not have ADHD, are there some resources you can share or support systems you can share for them so they can manage that and support their family best they can and get the support they need?
Yeah, I mean, you really have to have a support network. If you are the only one in your family that is neurotypical and everyone is neuro-diverse, then you have to understand what's going on, and you have to be kind of the steward of that scaffolding or the structure. But then you need very clear breaks away from that, right? You need time away, time alone. You need a posse, a group of people that support you and understand you, and you have to be very clear about what you need. There were people that supported me, but were judgmental of my children. That's not helpful. I need them to understand what is going on and be supportive of me without being judgmental of my children or family. And so that's something to be careful with. I know that there was a Southwest Metro ADHD connection, and I don't know where that is. I would be interested in hearing if people want some sort of a support group, and giving me feedback on when that would be most convenient for you, or where what they would be looking for in that, because I think that would be very helpful. And I think part of the support system is also people that will provide some respite for you.
Mm-hmm.
Take your kids for a night, take your kids for a weekend, and provide a break for you periodically, either for you and your husband or your partner, or for you alone, right?
Yeah, those are great reminders. And if people are interested in pursuing support groups, we can, and Judy, I pulled up your contact information if that's okay to
Yes.
reach out, and we can look into some options as well and communicate that. I think we have time. There's another question on here. And this also goes into your description and how some of the symptoms that present within ADHD can overlap with other diagnoses. How can, or what's the best way to tell what is at the root of some of those challenges and behaviors if you're not sure if it's ADHD, or could that be anxiety or autism? how does that work when those symptoms can overlap?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very difficult, difficult question. The best way to determine is have a full psych eval, right? Where they're teasing apart those things. Now, I will say, when I'm starting to work with a person, I'm always asking if trauma is part of the equation, because trauma almost always has to be dealt with first. So if there is a history of trauma, then we deal with that first. The differences in autism and ADHD are often very clear, because they're orders of magnitude difference from a social and emotional perspective. ADHD is not as severe often as autism, but there is some, related comorbidity with the two of them. Often, if it is more common that children that have ADHD or have autism would also have ADHD, it is not true in the reverse, that kids with ADHD would also have autism. So if autism is the diagnosis, then lots of the techniques that work with ADHD will work and will help. But yeah.
That's great. There's another one in here. You brought up trauma. Could you explain how that might look? Is it always a major event, or can that also be something smaller that as an adult we might not think that's a traumatic experience?
Right. So trauma is a very complex discussion, right? So I referred to, so no, it doesn't always have to be a big event. So there are obvious things that, abuse of any kind, physical, sexual, mental, emotional, those are traumatic events. But it could be kind of a constant complex trauma situation, right? In a where I just had a conversation with one of my clients this morning about complex trauma. Rejection sensitivity over time can look like complex trauma. And what that means is, if your body feels threatened, it goes into fight, flight, freeze, fib, fawn, and it will then, that's a heightened state where your body is on high alert. And if you are in high alert often, then we call that hypervigilance. And it really modifies your nervous system. Many kids that are getting negative messages over time will develop this rejection sensitivity, which feels like complex trauma. And they will be in a hypervigilant state all the time, very sensitive to anything that feels judgmental or disapproving. So it doesn't have to be a big event. It could be a smaller event. It could be this complex trauma, or it could be just the overwhelming negative messages that the kids get every day.
Wow, that's so helpful to understand, and I imagine that could be an entire webinar on its own, just with that topic. Yeah.
And Kathy Flaminio and I do a full day education, and she talks a lot about that. How do you calm the nervous system down, right? And so it's really helpful, because that hypervigilance, one thing that I heard early on, which broke my heart and kind of fueled my passion to move in this direction, was that kiddos that have ADHD often get up to 85% of their messages are negative every day. And that's horrifying in and of itself. But when you compare that to neurotypical kids, they're getting 15% of their messages that are negative. So that's an overwhelming amount of judgment and negative messages. So
Yeah,
we need
yeah.
to be addressing that.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think we're about up for time. I just want to extend a big thank you on behalf of all of us here at Groves. Your presentation was so rich with valuable information and tips for navigating the family system when ADHD is present. You've helped put perspective on the complexities and thankfully also the superpowers of ADHD.
Yeah.
And we're so grateful for you to be in our community of support. And just a reminder to those who are registered and viewing, the recording of this will be sent out in a follow-up email to anybody or to everybody who registered. And again, we just want to thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you at another event. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.